FBI Director Christopher Wray has become public enemy number one among supporters of the former president in the past 48 hours. On right-leaning cable news and among certain Republicans in Congress, he's the villain, partisan hack doing the political bidding of the Democrats. Except here's the problem. None of it lines up with his decorated, decades-long record as a Republican, a record which features many endorsements from hardline conservatives. I've said it many times, and I'll say it again. If this raid on Donald Trump's home was just about a Presidential Records Act violation, I will be criticizing Wray too. But criticizing him is very different from claiming Wray is a far-left radical.
Christopher Wray has demonstrated during his tenure that he is not interested in uncovering malfeasance and misfeasance and cleaning up the cesspool that the FBI has come. Instead, he wants to cover it up. And I think that's a shame. I think he should be fired.
If those organizations are to remain in their current form, then there needs to be a top-down clean-out of all the upper brass and all the upper management in all those organizations, starting with Merrick Garland and the FBI director. In the deep state run by the swamp and the Democrats in the deep state, and nobody can hold them accountable.
If you look at Christopher Wray's past, it's hard to reconcile it with the caricature some on the far right are trying to present. Wray is a registered Republican, always has been. He's even donated roughly $50,000 to Republican candidates over the years. He previously clerked for famed conservative judge Michael Ludwig, George H.W. Bush appointee on the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals. In 2001, he was named Principal Associate Deputy Attorney General in George W. Bush's Justice Department. In 2003, it was unanimously confirmed by the Senate when former President Bush named him Assistant Attorney General for the DOJ's Criminal Division. It was the second time Bush, a Republican president, promoted him during his tenure. And again, he was unanimously approved by a Republican Senate. And then the capper, 2017, when he was named Director of the FBI and was unanimously confirmed by 50 Republican senators. Not one nay vote in the bunch. And of course, you know who nominated him to that post, Donald Trump. He said, quote, "I'll be nominating Christopher Wray, a man of impeccable credentials, to be the new director of the FBI." And here he is extolling Wray's virtues at a news conference in July of 2017.
We will have a great FBI director. I think he's doing really well. And we're very proud of that choice. I think I've done a great service to the country by choosing him. He will make us all proud.
And so this effort on the part of the former president and those doing his bidding and on cable news to turn Christopher Wray into a left-wing radical, it's really just an effort to smear him and distract from the real issues. Criticism of him is fair game. That's part of the job. And he and the FBI have made mistakes. But suggesting he's politically corrupted is something else. There's no evidence whatsoever that he's anything but a straight-shooting Republican FBI director. And those of us in what I call the marginalized moderate majority have to speak out to defend people like him so we don't end up with radicals of either side in important positions like this. Joining us now, someone with a bit of a different view of Wray, Mailman. She worked as Special Assistant to President Trump and Associate White House Staff Secretary, Deputy Assistant to the President, and Deputy White House Policy Coordinator. Associate White House Counsel, all under former President Trump. May, thanks so much for coming on the show. Appreciate it. Let me start by asking you, do you think Chris Wray is a corrupted Democrat being driven by a desire to end Donald Trump's political career?
So I don't. I think probably, probably votes mostly Republican, hangs out with quite a few Republicans. But I don't really think that that is the educated critique of Chris Wray. And I think that it really is a critique that you can have against the Republican Party for a very long time, which is that we are weak and we like, to nominate these types of weak people. And what I mean by weak is actually not that Chris Wray lacks a backbone against the president. I think he probably does. I think if Biden called him up and said, "I want you to do something overtly partisan," he would probably say no, and he would enjoy that. He would really, feel proud of that, just as he did oftentimes with President Trump. What I mean is, it has been seen for so long, especially for Republicans, that to defer to the agency, to defer to the expert, that is next to godliness. And I think that Chris Wray really has that deference that there were a group of people who really wanted to do this. There were a group of people who thought that it was the right thing. And he didn't have a separate independent judgment. And that type of weakness, that type of lack of backbone against an agency that might be just rolling without thinking about all of the things that they should, that is a weakness that Republicans have had for too long. And that, I think, is the real criticism of Chris Wray.
All right, so your point is that you think that there were people who were pressuring him to do this, as opposed to him leading. Now, you don't know that. I don't know that. That's you. And look, I engage in speculation all the time, so I'm not criticizing you for speculating. But what is it about Chris Wray that makes you think he wouldn't stand up to FBI agents, for example, if they said, we got to go in there, this is a violation of the law, we've got to take him down for this, a violation of the law is a violation of the law. What makes you think he wouldn't have the backbone to say no?
I think it's because that's what really he was nominated and confirmed to do. This is the type of leadership that, certainly I think Republicans have liked for a very long time, which is somebody who is going to defer to agency expertise. I think you saw this a little bit, actually, kind of going the other way when Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen, the head of DHS, has been a little bit public in saying that she really, didn't like family separation. But at some point, CBP is asking for it, ICE is asking for it, and it's an agency of 250,000 people. Are you going to just overrule huge swaths of them? No. And so there are real problems with deferring to the agency. So I just think that he is somebody who was chosen exactly for that characteristic. And so when he's exhibiting it, it wouldn't be surprising.
It's a very interesting critique. We'll see if it's true. And look, and I will say, I said this before, I'm going to say it again. If it turns out that this was a raid based on a document that the president had, if it's not nuclear codes or something else that's super important, and it was just a document, then maybe you're right. Maybe he did get pressured by people who were like, it's still a violation of the law, it's still and they didn't think the big picture. We shall see. May Mailman, thanks so much for the conversation. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find NewsNation on your cable provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.